The gunshot that shattered the morning silence in Cheyenne, Wyoming sent Clara Morrison diving behind a water trough, her heart hammering against her ribs as she pressed her back against the splintered wood, and wondered if leaving Boston 3 weeks ago had been the worst decision of her life. It was April 1876, and the frontier town was everything her late father's letters had promised it would be. Wild, dangerous, and utterly unforgiving to a 22-year-old woman alone. The shooting stopped as quickly as it started, leaving only the acrid smell of gunpowder hanging in the spring air and the sound of boots running down the dusty street. Clara waited several long minutes before daring to peek over the trough. The street had cleared except for one man who stood in front of the general store, holstering his revolver with practiced ease. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and a weathered face that suggested he was somewhere in his mid-20s. His eyes, she noticed even from a distance, were an unusual shade of green that seemed to catch the morning light. "You can come out now," he called, his voice carrying easily across the empty street. "They are gone." Clara stood slowly, brushing dust from her navy traveling dress. Her hands were shaking, but she forced them still as she stepped around the trough. Who were they? Cattle rustlers. They have been hitting ranches north of here for the past month. He walked toward her, moving with the easy confidence of a man comfortable with violence. Up close, she could see a scar along his jawline and the way his eyes assessed her with equal parts curiosity and wariness. "You are new in town." It was not a question, but Clara answered anyway. "I arrived on the stage 3 days ago. I am Clara Morrison. My father owned the land deed office before he died last winter. Cole Brennan." He touched the brim of his hat. "I run cattle about 10 miles west of here. Your father was a good man. I am sorry for your loss." The simple condolence, delivered without flowery sentiment, hit Clara harder than all the elaborate speeches she had endured back in Boston. She swallowed hard. "Thank you. I barely knew him, honestly. He left when I was 6. But he left me the business in his will, and there was nothing keeping me in Massachusetts." Cole's expression shifted slightly, something that might have been understanding flickering across his features. "The land office is a good business if you know what you are doing." "Do you know what you are doing?" "Not yet," Clara admitted, "but I learn quickly." For the first time, Cole smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "I believe you do. Come on, I will walk you back. Those rustlers might circle around, and you do not want to be alone if they do." As they walked down the wooden sidewalk toward the small building that housed the land office, Clara became acutely aware of Cole beside her. He moved like a predator, alert to every sound and movement, but there was something reassuring about his presence. She had been alone for so long, first after her mother's death 2 years ago, then during the long journey west. Having someone look out for her, even temporarily, felt like water in a desert. "The office is in decent shape," Cole observed as they reached the door. "Your father kept good records. You will need to familiarize yourself with all the property boundaries in the county. Ranchers get touchy about their land. Will you help me?" The words escaped before Clara could stop them, and she felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I mean, I could pay you for your time. I just need someone who knows the area." Cole studied her for a long moment, and Clara had the unsettling feeling he was seeing right through her careful composure to the frightened woman beneath. "I will do better than that," he said finally. "I will teach you to shoot. A woman alone out here needs to know how to protect herself." Over the next 2 weeks, Cole became a fixture in Clara's new life. He arrived every morning at dawn before the heat of the day set in and took her out beyond the edge of town where he set up targets against an old fence. The first time Clara held the revolver, its weight surprised her. The metal was cold and heavy, and her hands trembled as Cole positioned himself behind her, his arms coming around to adjust her grip. "Steady," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "Do not think about the noise. Just breathe and squeeze, do not pull." When the gun fired, the recoil shocked through Clara's entire body. She missed the target by 3 feet, but Cole's hands steadied her, keeping her grounded. "Again," he said, and there was something in his voice that made her want to try to succeed, to prove she could survive in this harsh landscape. By the second week, Clara could hit the target more often than not. She learned the weight of the gun, the kick of the trigger, the way to compensate for wind and distance. But more than that, she learned Cole. She learned that he had grown up in Texas, that his parents had died of fever when he was 16, that he had built his ranch from nothing over the past 8 years. She learned that he was quieter than most men, more thoughtful, and that when he did speak, his words carried weight. She also learned that she was falling for him, and it terrified her. It was a Wednesday morning in early May when everything changed. They had finished shooting practice and were walking back toward town, the sun climbing higher in a cloudless sky. Cole was telling her about a dispute between 2 ranchers over water rights when Clara stumbled on a rock, and his hand shot out to steady her. The touch, skin against skin, where he gripped her elbow, sent electricity racing up her arm. Cole felt it too. She knew because he froze, his fingers still wrapped around her arm, and when she looked up at him, the intensity in his green eyes made her breath catch. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then Cole released her and stepped back, his jaw tight. "We should get you back," he said, his voice rough. That night, Clara lay in the small room above the land office and admitted to herself what she had been denying for days. She was in love with Cole Brennan. The realization should have brought joy, but instead it brought fear. She had come west to build a new life, to be independent, to prove she did not need anyone. Falling in love felt like giving up that hard-won autonomy, like handing over the reins of her life to someone else. And worse, what if he did not feel the same? What if she was reading too much into a few heated glances and casual touches? The next morning, Cole did not come for their usual lesson. Or the next day. By the 3rd day, Clara was certain she had done something wrong, that he had somehow sensed her feelings and was avoiding her. She threw herself into learning the land office business, studying her father's meticulous records, and meeting with ranchers who needed deeds filed or boundaries confirmed. The work was absorbing, but it could not fill the hollow ache that had taken up residence in her chest. On the 4th day, Clara was sorting through a stack of property maps when the office door burst open. Cole stood in the doorway, hat in hand, his hair disheveled as though he had been running his fingers through it. "I need to talk to you." Clara set down the papers, her heart suddenly racing. "All right." Cole closed the door behind him and crossed the small office in 3 strides. "I have been trying to stay away. I told myself it was the right thing to do, that you need time to settle in, to figure out your life here without some rancher complicating things." He stopped in front of her desk, gripping his hat so hard she thought the brim might crack. "But I cannot do it anymore. I cannot stay away from you." The words hung in the air between them, raw and honest. Clara stood slowly, her legs unsteady. "Cole, let me finish," he interrupted. "I know this is fast. I know you just got here and you are still grieving your father and adjusting to a completely different life. But Clara, every morning I wake up thinking about you. Every night I lie awake remembering the way you laugh when you finally hit the target, or the way you bite your lip when you are concentrating on something. I am in this deep already, and it scares the hell out of me." Clara's throat was tight with emotion. She walked around the desk until only a foot of space separated them. "I am scared of what I am feeling," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The confession felt like jumping off a cliff, exhilarating and terrifying at once. Cole's eyes searched her face. "What are you feeling?" "Everything," Clara said. "When you are near me, I feel alive in a way I never did back in Boston. When you are not here, I feel incomplete. I came out here to be independent, to prove I could stand on my own, and instead, I have fallen completely and utterly in love with you." The words seemed to hit Cole like a physical force. He dropped his hat and reached for her, his hands cupping her face with a gentleness that contrasted with the intensity in his eyes. "So am I," he said roughly. "So am I, but let's be brave. Let's take this chance even though it is terrifying." Let's build something together." When his lips met hers, Clara felt like she was coming home. The kiss was tender at first, almost hesitant, as though they were both testing the reality of this moment. Then Cole's arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer, and Clara's hands fisted in his shirt as the kiss deepened. It was everything she had imagined and nothing like she expected, all heat and promise, and the sense that something fundamental had shifted in her world. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right," he said. "I want to court you properly. I want everyone in this town to know that you are mine and I am yours." "Yes," Clara breathed. "Yes to all of that." The next few months passed in a blur of happiness. Cole courted Clara with old-fashioned determination, showing up every Sunday to take her to church and then out to his ranch for the afternoon. The land he had built was beautiful, rolling grassland dotted with cattle and a sturdy house he had constructed himself. Clara fell in love with the place almost as much as she loved the man who owned it. She also fell in love with the work at the land office. Her father's records were impeccable, and she had a head for the complex web of property rights and territorial boundaries. Ranchers who had been skeptical of a Boston woman running the office began to respect her knowledge and fair dealing. Clara was building something of her own, proving she could stand on her own 2 feet, even as she was building a relationship with Cole. They spent long evenings on the porch of the land office, talking about everything and nothing. Cole told her about his dreams of expanding his herd, of building something that would last beyond his lifetime. Clara told him about her childhood in Boston, about her mother's slow decline and the loneliness that had driven her west. They learned each other's histories, their hopes and fears and secret dreams. In July, a crisis threatened to tear them apart. A group of rustlers, the same ones who had been terrorizing ranches in the spring, hit Cole's property. They made off with nearly a third of his herd, and Cole went after them with a posse of neighboring ranchers. Clara spent 3 days barely sleeping, jumping at every sound, terrified that Cole would not come back. When he finally rode into town, exhausted and covered in dust but unharmed, Clara ran to him without caring who was watching. Cole dismounted and caught her in his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I thought I lost you," Clara choked out, tears streaming down her face. "Never," Cole said fiercely. "I will always come back to you, always." That night, after Cole had washed up and eaten, he asked Clara to walk with him. They went to the little church at the edge of town where a graveyard overlooked the valley. Cole led her to a bench beneath an old cottonwood tree, its leaves rustling in the evening breeze. "When I was out there tracking those rustlers, all I could think about was you," Cole said, taking her hand. "About how much I wanted to come home to you to build a life with you. Clara Morrison, I know we have only known each other a few months, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. Will you marry me?" Clara's breath caught. She looked at this man who had taught her to shoot, who had shown her that strength and tenderness could coexist, who had helped her build a life in this wild place. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and clear. "Yes, I will marry you." They were wed in August, in that same little church, with half the town in attendance. Clara wore a simple ivory dress she had sewn herself, with wildflowers in her hair that Cole had picked that morning. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Cole kissed her with a thoroughness that made several of the older ladies fan themselves, and Clara laughed against his mouth, happier than she had ever been. The first months of marriage were an adjustment. Clara moved out to Cole's ranch, bringing her books and clothes and the precious few items that had belonged to her mother. She kept the land office running, riding into town 3 days a week to handle business while Cole worked the ranch. It was exhausting and exhilarating, and there were moments when Clara wondered if she had taken on too much. But every night, she came home to Cole. They would sit on the porch of their house, watching the sun set over the grasslands, and Cole would tell her about his day while Clara rested her head on his shoulder. Those moments, simple and domestic, became Clara's anchor, This was what she had been searching for without knowing it. A partnership. A place where she could be both independent and deeply connected to another person. In October, Clara discovered she was pregnant. The realization came gradually, a missed monthly cycle followed by morning nausea and a strange exhaustion that no amount of sleep could cure. She waited until she was certain before telling Cole, choosing a Sunday morning when they were alone at the ranch. "I have news," she said, watching his face carefully. Cole looked up from the harness he was mending, his expression curious. "Good news or bad news? That depends on your perspective," Clara said, trying to keep her voice light even though her heart was hammering. "We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Cole just stared at her. Then he dropped the harness and crossed the barn in 3 long strides, sweeping Clara up in his arms. "That is the best news I have ever heard," he said, spinning her around. "Are you happy? Are you scared? Tell me what you are feeling." "Both," Clara admitted, laughing as he set her down. "I am terrified and thrilled and wondering how I am going to manage the land office and a baby." "We will figure it out together," Cole promised. "Just like we figure everything out." The pregnancy was harder than Clara expected. The morning sickness persisted well into her 4th month, and the work of running the land office became increasingly difficult as her body changed. But Cole was there for every moment of it, holding her hair when she was sick, rubbing her swollen feet in the evenings, and accompanying her on every trip into town even when his ranch work suffered for it. In March of 1877, during a late spring snowstorm that blanketed the valley in white, Clara went into labor. The midwife from town barely made it through the snow in time, and Cole paced the floor of their bedroom like a caged animal while Clara labored. The pain was unlike anything she had ever experienced, waves of agony that made her question every choice that had led to this moment. But then Cole was there, holding her hand and murmuring encouragement, and Clara found strength she did not know she possessed. Their son was born just after midnight, his angry cries filling the small house. Cole cut the cord with shaking hands, and when the midwife placed the baby in Clara's arms, tears streamed down both their faces. "He is perfect," Cole whispered, touching the baby's tiny hand with one calloused finger. "What should we name him?" "James," Clara said immediately, "after my father, James Cole Brennan." Cole kissed her forehead, his own tears falling into her hair. "It is perfect, you are perfect." "I love you so much." The months that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and endless wonder. James was a healthy baby with his father's green eyes and his mother's dark hair. Clara took a step back from the land office, hiring a young clerk to handle the day-to-day operations while she focused on motherhood. It was an adjustment, learning to balance her identity as a businesswoman with this new role, but Clara found that she loved it more than she had anticipated. Cole was a devoted father, coming in from the range to hold his son, changing diapers without complaint, and walking the floor with James when the baby was fussy. Watching her husband with their child, Clara fell in love with him all over again. This was the man she had chosen, the partner she had built a life with, and every day she was grateful for the courage they had both shown in admitting their feelings. As James grew from an infant to a toddler, life on the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. Cole's cattle operation expanded, and Clara gradually returned to working at the land office, bringing James with her when he was old enough. The boy was curious and bright, already showing signs of his father's quiet determination and his mother's quick mind. In the fall of 1879, Clara discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the news was met with excitement rather than anxiety. They had done this before and survived. When their daughter was born the following spring, they named her Sarah after Cole's mother. She was smaller than James had been, with her father's smile and a temperament that was somehow both fierce and gentle. The years passed, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their family. James grew tall and strong, learning to ride almost before he could walk properly. Sarah was quieter but no less determined, following her brother everywhere and demanding to be included in everything he did. Clara expanded the land office, adding surveying services and eventually hiring 2 additional clerks. Cole's ranch became one of the most successful in the county, known for quality cattle and fair dealing, but it was not always easy. In 1882, a drought hit the valley hard. Creeks dried up, grass withered, and cattle died in the summer heat. Cole worked himself nearly to exhaustion trying to keep his herd alive, driving them farther and farther in search of water and grazing land. Clara watched him push himself to the breaking point and finally intervened, insisting he hire additional ranch hands and accept help from their neighbors. "You do not have to do everything alone," she told him one night after he had come in from another 18-hour day. "That is what I am here for. That is what our friends are here for. Let us help you." Cole, proud and stubborn, finally admitted defeat. With help from neighboring ranchers and a stroke of luck in the form of late summer rains, they made it through the drought. The experience humbled Cole and brought the community closer together. When a neighboring ranch was hit by rustlers the following year, Cole was the first to organize a posse and help recover the stolen cattle. Through it all, Clara and Cole's love deepened and matured. The passionate intensity of their early relationship evolved into something richer and more enduring. They knew each other's rhythms, could communicate with a glance across a crowded room, and found comfort in the familiar routines of married life. But the spark between them never died. Cole could still make Clara's heart race with a particular look, and Clara could still make Cole laugh in a way no one else could. In 1885, Clara discovered she was pregnant for a 3rd time. At 31, she felt older and wiser than she had been with the previous pregnancies, but also more tired. This pregnancy was harder, her body slower to recover, and there were complications that worried the midwife. But in December, she delivered a healthy baby boy they named Thomas, and the joy of adding another child to their family outweighed the difficulties. James, now 8 years old, was a natural big brother, protective and patient with the new baby. Sarah, at 5, was less interested in the infant and more interested in learning to ride her new pony. Clara watched her children grow and marveled at the family she and Cole had built. This was what bravery had bought them, this loud, chaotic, beautiful life. As the 1880s progressed, Clara became increasingly involved in the community. She advocated for a proper school to be built in town, arguing passionately at town meetings that the children of the valley deserved better than the one-room shack that currently served as a schoolhouse. Cole supported her efforts, attending meetings and contributing both money and labor to the building project. The new school opened in 1887, and Clara was asked to serve on the school board, a position she accepted with pride. The land office continued to thrive under Clara's management. She had developed a reputation for fairness and expertise that extended beyond the county. Ranchers and homesteaders came from miles away to have Clara handle their property transactions, trusting her knowledge and integrity. It was deeply satisfying work, and Clara took pride in the business she had built from her father's legacy, but her greatest pride was her family. James grew into a serious young man, already helping his father with the ranch work and showing an aptitude for the cattle business. Sarah, wild and free-spirited, spent hours exploring the valley, coming home with scraped knees and stories of adventure. Thomas, the baby, was sweet-natured and affectionate, always ready with a hug or a gap-toothed smile. In the summer of 1889, Cole surprised Clara with a trip. He arranged for a neighbor to watch the children and the ranch, and he took his wife to Denver for a week. It was the first time they had been alone together, truly alone, since before James was born. They stayed in a proper hotel, ate in restaurants, and walked through the city like newlyweds. On their last night, they sat in their hotel room, and Cole pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was a gold locket on a delicate chain. "I wanted to give you something to mark our 10th anniversary," he said, fastening it around her neck. "Open it." Inside the locket were 2 tiny photographs, one of James and Sarah, the other of Thomas. Clara's eyes filled with tears. "It is beautiful. Cole, this whole week has been beautiful. Thank you for reminding me that we are still us, not just parents and business owners, but the two people who took a chance on love." Cole kissed her softly. "I fall in love with you more every single day. You are the bravest person I know, Clara. You left everything you knew to build a life out here, and you have done it with such grace and strength. I am in awe of you." "We did it together," Clara corrected. "That is what makes it work. We are brave together." The 1890s brought new challenges and changes. James, at 13, was already taking on significant responsibilities at the ranch. He had Cole's steady temperament and Clara's sharp mind, and it was clear he would make an excellent rancher. Sarah, at 10, announced she wanted to be a surveyor and started accompanying Clara on surveying jobs, learning to read the land and use the instruments. Thomas, at 5, was starting school and proving to be as academically inclined as his mother. Cole's hair began to show threads of silver at the temples, and Clara found her own dark hair turning gray. They were not old, just entering their late 30s, but the hard work of frontier life left its mark. Still, when Clara looked at her husband, she saw the same man who had taught her to shoot all those years ago, the same man who had admitted he was scared but chose to be brave anyway. In 1893, the country was hit by an economic depression that affected even their remote corner of Wyoming. Cattle prices plummeted, and several neighboring ranches failed. Cole made the difficult decision to reduce his herd size, focusing on quality over quantity. Clara saw business at the land office slow as people stopped buying and selling property. Money was tight, and there were nights when Clara and Cole sat at their kitchen table, going over accounts and trying to figure out how to make ends meet. But they had built a strong foundation, and they weathered the storm. Cole's reputation for quality cattle meant he could still sell his beef, even if at lower prices. Clara's expertise meant the land office remained essential, even if there were fewer transactions, and they had each other, which mattered more than any amount of money. The children helped in their own ways. James worked alongside his father without complaint, taking on the work of a grown man even though he was only 16. Sarah picked up odd jobs in town, using her surveying skills to help with small projects. Even young Thomas contributed, helping his mother at the office after school. The family pulled together, and by 1896, the worst was over. As the century drew to a close, Clara reflected on the 23 years since she had arrived in Cheyenne. She had been a frightened young woman then, alone and uncertain, diving behind a water trough as gunfire echoed through the streets. Now she was a wife, mother, successful business owner, and respected member of the community. She had built a life beyond anything she could have imagined back in Boston, but more than any of those achievements, she had found love. Real, enduring love that had weathered hardship and grown stronger with each passing year. Cole was still her anchor, her partner, her greatest source of joy. When she looked at him across the dinner table, surrounded by their children, she felt overwhelming gratitude for that moment of bravery when they had both admitted their fear and chosen to move forward anyway. In 1900, James married a local rancher's daughter named Elizabeth, a capable young woman who fit seamlessly into the Brennan family. The wedding was a grand affair, with half the county in attendance, and Clara cried happy tears as she watched her eldest son take his vows. Cole built James and Elizabeth a house on the northern portion of the ranch, officially making his son a partner in the cattle operation. The following year, Clara and Cole celebrated their 23rd wedding anniversary. They were in their late 40s now, officially middle-aged, but Clara felt young when she was with Cole. They still took evening walks together, still talked for hours about everything and nothing, still made each other laugh. The passion between them had evolved into something deeper and richer, but it was no less intense. "Do you ever regret it?" Cole asked one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sun set. "Coming west, marrying a rancher, choosing this hard life instead of staying in Boston." Clara looked at her husband, at the lines around his eyes and the silver in his hair, at the strong hands that had held her through joy and sorrow, and she smiled. "Not for one single second," she said. "You are my greatest adventure, Cole Brennan. Loving you was the bravest thing I ever did, and it gave me everything I never knew I needed." Cole pulled her close, kissing her with the same tenderness he had shown on their wedding day. "I love you," he murmured against her lips. "More than words can say." Sarah left for college in 1902, one of only a handful of women studying engineering in the entire country. Clara was fiercely proud of her daughter, even as she missed her terribly. Thomas, now a teenager, showed an interest in law and talked about attending university in a few years. The children were growing up, building their own lives, and Clara felt the bittersweet ache of watching them go. But she also felt excitement for this new phase of life. Soon it would be just her and Cole again, back where they started, and there was something appealing about that prospect. They could travel more, focus on each other, rediscover the couple they had been before parenthood consumed their lives. In 1904, James and Elizabeth welcomed Clara and Cole's first grandchild, a girl they named Clara Rose. Holding her tiny granddaughter, Clara was overwhelmed with emotion. This was continuity, legacy, the proof that the life she and Cole had built would extend beyond them. When she looked up and saw tears in Cole's eyes as he held his granddaughter, she fell in love with him all over again. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. Sarah graduated and returned to Wyoming, becoming one of the first female surveyors in the state. Thomas went to law school and eventually opened a practice in Cheyenne. More grandchildren arrived, filling the ranch house with laughter and noise during holiday visits. Clara gradually stepped back from the land office, turning daily operations over to her capable clerks while remaining as a consultant. Cole, too, began to slow down. The years of hard physical labor had taken their toll, and by his mid-50s, he was content to let James run most of the ranch operations. He still rode out every day, still loved the land and the cattle, but he was finally willing to admit he did not have to do everything himself. In 1910, Clara and Cole celebrated their 33rd wedding anniversary. They were in their mid-50s now, officially entering the latter part of their lives. But when Clara looked at her husband, she still saw the young cowboy who had walked her home that first day, who had taught her to be brave, who had chosen to love her despite his fear. "We did it," Clara said as they sat on their porch, a blanket wrapped around both of them against the cool evening air. "We built something that lasted. We are not done yet," Cole said, pulling her closer. "I plan on loving you for at least another 33 years, Clara laughed. "That would make us nearly 90 years old. Then I guess we better take good care of each other," Cole said, kissing her temple. "I am not ready to stop this adventure yet." As the sun set over the Wyoming grasslands, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Clara rested her head on her husband's shoulder and felt profoundly content. They had taken a chance on love when both were terrified. They had chosen bravery over fear, partnership over independence, and it had given them this: a lifetime of love, a family that would endure, and the knowledge that they had faced every challenge together. The wild frontier that had seemed so dangerous and unforgiving when Clara first arrived had become home. The cowboy who had seemed like a stranger had become the other half of her soul. And the scared young woman who had hidden behind a water trough had grown into someone strong, capable, and deeply loved. It had not always been easy. There had been droughts and economic depressions, rustlers and hard winters, moments of doubt and fear. But through it all, they had each other. That was the gift of their bravery, not a life without fear or hardship, but a partnership that made every challenge bearable and every joy sweeter. As darkness fell and stars began to appear in the vast Wyoming sky, Cole and Clara remained on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms. They had been brave together, and it had made all the difference. Their love story, begun in violence and fear, had blossomed into something beautiful and enduring, a testament to the power of choosing courage over comfort, of taking a chance on love even when the outcome was uncertain. And as they sat there, two people who had grown old together but never grown apart, they knew that every moment of fear had been worth it. Every risk had paid off. Every act of bravery had led them here, to this perfect evening, this perfect life, this perfect love that would endure as long as they both drew breath and beyond. In the legacy of family and love they had built together in the wild, beautiful, unforgiving, and ultimately rewarding landscape of the American West.